The Christmas lights were blinking on the tree. Snow was tapping quietly against the window. And I was sitting on the cold kitchen floor of my childhood home, in the house I grew up in, the house I still came back to every year, still hoping, with my back pressed against the cabinet under the sink, and my hand clasped over my mouth. Not because I was sick. Not because I had fallen. But because through the thin wall separating the kitchen from the living room I could hear my mother's voice, and my sister's laughter, and my aunt's low, satisfied hum of agreement. And they were talking about me. Not kindly. Not with love. They were planning something deliberate, something they had clearly thought about for a while, something designed, with detail and intention, to humiliate me in front of the entire family on Christmas Day. And the worst part? The part that made the floor feel like it was tilting beneath me? They didn't even sound conflicted about it. They sounded excited. My name is Virginia. I am 30 years old. I live in a small apartment in Columbus, Ohio, and I work remotely as a data analyst for a logistics company. I am not dramatic. I am not someone who fabricates stories for sympathy. I am someone who spent most of her life being the quiet one, the steady one, the one who showed up, kept her head down, and believed, really truly believed, that family was the one place where you were always safe. That belief died on a cold December night on a kitchen floor. And what I did next, what I chose to do instead of cry, instead of confront, instead of collapse, changed everything, for me, for them, for the way I would walk through the rest of my life. I want to tell you every detail, because this story isn't just mine. I think it might be yours too. Before I go any further, if you have ever sat in a room full of people who were supposed to love you and felt completely alone, if you have ever been the one in your family who gives everything and somehow still ends up the target, I need you to stay with me through this entire video. And if this story touches something real inside you, please subscribe. Your support means everything, and it reminds me I'm not alone in this. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. You have to understand the family I came from to understand why what happened hurt as much as it did. My mother's name is Paula. She is a woman of considerable personality, the kind of woman who walks into a room and immediately becomes the center of it. She is charming when she wants to be, generous in front of audiences, and absolutely merciless in private. Growing up, we never quite knew which version of her we were going to get. The warm, laughing mother who made hot cocoa and let us sleep in her bed during thunderstorms, or the cold, cutting woman who could reduce you to nothing with 3 words and then act like nothing had happened over dinner. My father left when I was 9. He moved to Arizona, remarried a woman named Holly, and sent cards on birthdays until eventually even the cards stopped. I don't carry bitterness about him anymore. That took years of work. But his absence created a vacuum in our house that my mother filled with control. My older sister is Madsen. She is 34 now, and she has always been my mother's favorite. Not in a subtle way, but in the way that was so obvious it became a running joke among our extended family. Madsen is beautiful in the way that makes people notice her when she enters a room. She married a man named Cameron Sutherland 4 years ago, a real estate developer who wears his wealth the way some people wear cologne, in excess, and apparently for everyone else's benefit. They have 1 daughter together, a 2-year-old named Italia, and they live in a large house in a suburb of Cincinnati with a kitchen that was featured in a local lifestyle magazine. Madsen and I are not close. We were once when we were very small. I remember being 7 and she being 11, and she used to let me curl up next to her while she read. But somewhere between adolescence and adulthood, she chose a side, and the side she chose was my mother's. My younger brother is Ben. He is 26 and he is the wild card of the family. The one who has never quite figured out what he wants, who shows up late to everything, who borrows money and forgets to pay it back, who is somehow still forgiven for everything because he has a smile that makes people forget to be angry. I love Ben. I have always loved Ben. He is not malicious. He is just absent. Absent in the way that means when things get hard, you cannot count on him to stand next to you. He drifts. He always has. And then there is my Aunt Kimball. Kimball Weaver, my mother's older sister, is the family's self-appointed truth-teller. What that means in practice is that she says cruel things and then hides behind the word honest when people flinch. She is the woman who told me at age 15 that I would never be as pretty as Madsen, and said it with such casual certainty, like she was commenting on the weather. She is the woman who, at my college graduation dinner, spent 45 minutes talking about Cameron's new car instead of acknowledging my diploma. These are the people I drove 4 hours to see every Christmas. And I want to be honest with you. I kept coming back not out of obligation, but out of hope. Every single year, some stubborn, unreasonable piece of me believed that this Christmas would be different, that my mother would look at me with warmth instead of assessment, that Madsen would laugh with me instead of at me, that Kimball would say something, anything, kind. That hope is the most painful thing I have ever carried. The year this happened, I had genuinely been doing well for myself. Not in a flashy way, in a quiet, steady, this is mine and I built it way. I had received a significant promotion at work in October. I became a senior data analyst with a team of 3 reporting to me and a salary increase that meant I could finally breathe without calculating every purchase. I had paid off my car in September. I had been seeing a therapist named Dr. Rhodes for almost a year, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was learning who I was when nobody was watching me for flaws. I had also, quietly and slowly, been making changes to my life that I hadn't announced to my family. I had redecorated my apartment. I had taken a solo trip to Portland in the fall and discovered that I loved hiking, that I loved my own company, that I was at the core of me, someone I actually liked. I had started writing, just in a journal, nothing ambitious, but the act of putting my own thoughts on paper had unlocked something in me that I didn't have a name for yet. I was becoming, I think, for the first time, myself. And I made the decision to go home for Christmas. My friend Taylor, my closest friend who I have known since our freshman year at Ohio State, told me not to. Taylor Lawson is the kind of friend who has watched me walk back into difficult situations my entire adult life, and who has learned after years of patience that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is just say it plainly. She said, "Virginia, every year you go, every year you come back hollowed out. What is it going to take?" I told her I thought this year would be different. She gave me a look, a long, quiet, I love you but you're wrong look. And she said, "Call me when you need to be picked up." I told her I wouldn't need to be. I packed my car on December 23rd. I had gifts for everyone, thoughtful ones, not obligatory ones. A cashmere scarf for my mother in a deep burgundy she had admired in a store window back in September. A monogrammed leather journal for Madsen. A toy set for little Italia. A gift card to his favorite sporting goods store for Ben. A book of crossword puzzles for Aunt Kimball because she mentioned once, a long time ago, that she did them every morning. I had a casserole dish I'd made from scratch in the back seat, still warm, because my mother had mentioned in passing that she was doing a potluck-style Christmas Eve dinner and hadn't asked me to bring anything, so I brought something anyway, because that's what I do. I arrived at the house at around 6 in the evening on December 23rd. The moment I walked in, I knew. I can't fully explain it. It was something in the air, something in the way Madsen's eyes flicked toward my mother when I came through the door, something in the way Kimball's smile was just slightly too wide, too practiced. Something was already in motion. I just didn't know what it was yet. It was after dinner on Christmas Eve. My mother had set the table beautifully. She always did. That was one truth about her. She had real talent for making things look lovely from the outside. Cameron had brought 2 expensive bottles of wine. Ben had arrived 2 hours late with a gas station bouquet of flowers, and everyone had laughed and forgiven him instantly, which somehow, in the way small things do, made me feel very tired. Dinner was fine. I laughed when I was supposed to laugh. I passed dishes when asked. I complimented my mother's ham. I held little Italia on my lap for 20 minutes while Madsen went to get more wine, and I watched that small, warm, trusting face and felt something in my chest open up like a wound. After dinner, I went into the kitchen to start on the dishes. This is something I have done every Christmas since I was old enough to reach the sink. Nobody asked me to. Nobody offered to help. I just did it, the way I always did things, quietly, completely, without expectation of recognition. The door between the kitchen and the living room was an old wooden one with a gap at the bottom, and a latch that didn't quite catch unless you pushed it hard. I hadn't pushed it hard. So when the conversation in the living room shifted, when the laughter changed quality and lowered in volume, I heard every single word. My mother's voice first. I'm thinking the gift exchange, right when everyone is sitting around, that's the best time. Madsen's voice. Are you sure you want to do it in front of Cameron's parents? Cameron's parents, Tanner and Emily Sutherland, had apparently been invited to Christmas Day this year. I hadn't known. My mother, especially in front of them. Virginia needs to understand. She's been walking around like she's something now. The promotion, the apartment, a pause and then a small dismissive sound. She thinks she's better than us. Kimball. She always did, even when she was little. That serious face of hers. Madsen, quieter. So what are you actually going to do? My mother. I'm going to bring up Aaron. Silence. Even through the wall, I felt the weight of that name land in the room. Aaron Shore, my ex-boyfriend. A relationship that had ended 3 years ago after 2 years together, when I found out he had been cheating on me for most of those 2 years, with a woman from his office named Richie. It was the most painful thing that had ever happened to me. I had not spoken about it publicly, not to my family, not on social media, nowhere. But my mother knew, because I had made the mistake of calling her in the middle of it, crying, looking for comfort. She had stored it. She had kept it like a weapon in a drawer. And now she was planning to take it out and use it at Christmas, in front of Cameron's parents, in front of everyone, to remind me of the most humiliating chapter of my life. To remind everyone present that I had been cheated on, that I was still single, that at 30 I had nothing to show for my personal life, and to frame my recent growth and confidence as delusion rather than deserved. She was going to humiliate me. In front of an audience. On Christmas morning. And she was happy about it. I don't remember putting down the dish I was holding. I don't remember sliding down to the kitchen floor, but that's where I found myself. Back against the cabinet, hand over my mouth, the cold of the linoleum through my jeans, the sound of my own heartbeat very loud in my ears. And I made a decision. I was not going to cry. I was not going to confront anyone that night. I was not going to collapse. I was going to leave, and I was going to leave them something to think about. I stood up off that kitchen floor. I dried my hands on the dish towel. I placed the last clean pot in the drying rack with careful, deliberate precision. And then I walked upstairs to the guest room, my old bedroom, which had been repainted and refurnished years ago in a way that made clear there was no longer a space in this house held specifically for me. And I sat on the edge of the bed and I opened my laptop. I did not sleep that night. Where are you? That was the first thing she said. No greeting, no Merry Christmas. Just those 3 words, clipped and direct, with a quality in her voice I recognized immediately. The tone that meant she had prepared herself to be angry, had needed to be angry, and was furious to find that the anger felt hollow. I said, calmly, I'm home, Mom. Did you enjoy my gift? Silence. Long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then, that letter was not appropriate, Virginia. I had anticipated this framing, the move where the response to cruelty is reframed as the actual offense, where the person who put the weapon on the table declares themselves the victim of the person who finally named it. I said, I heard you, Mom, on Christmas Eve, through the kitchen wall. I heard everything you said about Aaron, about your plan for the morning. I heard all of it. Another silence. This one different from the first. The first silence was angry. This one was something else. Caught, exposed, briefly, something that might have been shame. She said, you were eavesdropping. I said, "I was washing your dishes." She said, "I was just joking. You know how Kimball gets, we were just talking." And here is the moment. Here is the moment I have replayed in my head more times than I can count, not because I am proud of what I said, but because it was the first time in 30 years of living that I said what was simply and factually true, out loud to my mother, without softening it, without qualifying it, without apologizing for it before she could be hurt by it. I said, "Mom, you are not joking. You plan to humiliate me in front of Cameron's parents using the most painful chapter of my adult life. You kept that story for 3 years, not because you cared about me, but because you wanted something to use. And what I need you to hear, not as an attack but as a fact, is that I am not going to be in rooms where that is allowed anymore. I love you. I genuinely love you. But love is not the same as permission, and I am no longer giving you permission." She started to speak. I continued. "I left your gift under the tree, the scarf you wanted. It's yours. Not as a peace offering and not to buy my way back into your good graces. I left it because I decided to be the person I want to be regardless of what you decide to do with it. I hope you have a good Christmas. I hope you think about what you were planning to do today and feel something honest about it. And when you're ready to talk, really talk, not perform, I'll be here." And I ended the call. Taylor was staring at me. She said, "Virginia." I said, "I know." She said, "That was the most," and she stopped, and her eyes went a little bright, and she said, "You've been practicing that your whole life, haven't you?" And I said, quietly, "Every day of it." Christmas Day passed in my apartment with Taylor, her dog, a very ambitious amount of food we ordered in, and 3 consecutive holiday movies we talked over the entirety of. It was the best Christmas I had had in a decade. I did not think about my phone the entire afternoon. I turned on the notifications and left it face down on the counter and felt, for perhaps the first time in my adult life, genuinely free. The texts came over the following days. "Ben texted me on Christmas afternoon. I read your letter. I'm sorry I never said anything. I'm sorry I was never the person who said anything. Can we talk?" I called him that evening. We talked for almost 2 hours. It was, I think, the most honest conversation we had ever had. He told me things about his own experience of our childhood that I had not known, ways he had felt invisible too, ways he had learned to manage my mother through performance and distance, ways he had told himself for years that going along was the same thing as being loyal. He cried. So did I. I told him I loved him. I told him I didn't want to lose my brother. He said he didn't want to lose his sister. We agreed to try. Madsen texted me 4 days after Christmas. A long message, written and rewritten. I could tell by the cadence of it. She said she had sat with my letter for 3 days before she could respond. She said she didn't know how to apologize for something that had been a pattern for so long that she had stopped seeing it as a choice. She said that she had been thinking for the first time in years about who she was as a child before everything got complicated. She didn't ask me to forgive her. She said she just wanted me to know she heard me. That, honestly, was more than I had expected. It was enough, for now, a beginning. Kimball did not text. That was fine. My mother texted me on New Year's Eve. One line. I read your letter again. I don't know what to say yet, but I read it again. I held that message for a long time. It is not an apology. It is not reconciliation. It is not the end of anything complicated or the beginning of something easy. But it was real. It was small and unperformed and real, in a way that my mother is almost never unperformed. And I chose to receive it as what it was, not what I wished it were, not what I feared it might become, just what it was. A woman reading a hard truth for the second time. That, for now, is something. I am going to tell you something that I spent a long time being afraid to say out loud. The people who hurt us most are almost always the people we love most. That is not a paradox. That is just the logic of vulnerability. You cannot be devastated by a stranger. You can only be devastated by someone you let close enough to matter. And the families we grow up in, the ones that shape the language we speak and the way we hear our own names, they are the closest thing to us there is, which is why when they wound us, the wound goes deeper than anything else can reach. For years, for most of my life, I told myself that the answer to that wound was to become easier to love. To be quieter or more agreeable, or less threatening, or less ambitious, or less myself, in whatever way I had diagnosed as the thing that was making people not love me the way I needed to be loved. And what I learned on a kitchen floor on Christmas Eve with my hand over my mouth is this: you cannot earn the love of someone who has decided not to give it. You can become smaller and smaller and quieter, and they will still look for the piece of you that is left to cut down, not because you deserve it, but because they have learned to feel powerful at your expense, and because you have never shown them clearly enough that you will not allow it. Showing them is not cruel, it is not revenge, it is not war. It is a boundary, spoken out loud, with love but without apology. I left my mother's house on Christmas Eve, and I took myself with me, all of me. The quiet parts, the strong parts, the parts still healing, the parts that were just becoming something new and tender and worth protecting. I took all of it, and I drove 4 hours in the dark, and I did not leave any piece of myself behind for someone else to use as ammunition. And that was the gift. Not the letters, not the absent chair at the table, not the silenced performance of a mother who came prepared to hurt and found instead that I was gone. The gift was the decision to stop waiting to be chosen. To choose myself first. I want to be clear. I am not anti-family. I am not advising you to cut people out of your life or to stop loving difficult people, or to abandon hope for the people who have hurt you. Some of those relationships deserve patience and continued effort. My mother may, over time, become someone capable of the kind of honest connection I need from her. I do not know. I am not closing that door. But I am no longer sitting in rooms that are dangerous to me and calling it love out of habit. I am not washing dishes while someone plans my humiliation in the next room, and coming back for more because I'm afraid of what it means to leave. I am 30 years old. I live in Ohio. I have a job I am proud of, and a friend who shows up with pastries and zero judgment, and a journal full of thoughts that are entirely my own. I have been to Portland and stood on a mountain by myself and loved my own company. I am, finally, in the process of becoming someone I would have been deeply grateful to meet when I was 15, and sitting on that same kitchen floor for completely different, but not entirely unrelated reasons. And that is worth protecting. That is worth standing up for. Even in the middle of Christmas, even in front of everyone. Especially then. It is March now. Columbus is in that tentative almost spring that Ohio does, where the cold hasn't quite released its grip, but something underneath the ground has clearly decided to move. The trees outside my window are doing that thing where the branches look darker even before the buds appear, like they know something is coming even before you can see it. I met Madsen for lunch 2 weeks ago. In a neutral city, neither her suburb nor my Columbus. A restaurant she picked, a table by a window. It was awkward in the way that real things sometimes are when all the performance has been stripped away, and two people are sitting across from each other with only their actual selves to offer. We talked for 3 hours. We talked about our childhood. We talked about things we had never said to each other. She told me about the ways my mother's favoritism had hurt her too, differently in the specific ways that being the favorite carries its own kind of damage. She had been molded into an instrument of her mother's will, and somewhere along the way she had stopped questioning whether the will was good. She said that. She said it out loud, and it cost her something to say it. I told her about Aaron, the full version. The version I had never told anyone in my family because I had learned that night 3 years ago, when my mother had listened and then stored the story like ammunition, that my family was not a safe place to be vulnerable. Madsen listened. She didn't try to fix it or minimize it. She just listened, and at the end she said, "I'm sorry I wasn't the kind of sister you could have told that to." We are not fixed. We are not suddenly the sisters we might have been. But we are, for the first time, trying to build something honest instead of maintaining something comfortable. That is more than I thought I would have on the other side of Christmas Eve. I have not spoken to my mother since New Year's Eve. The single text sits in my phone unresponded to, not out of cruelty, but because I am waiting for something real rather than reacting to something symbolic. When she is ready to have a real conversation, I will be here. When she wants to talk rather than perform, I will pick up the phone. But I am not going to manage her feelings at the expense of my own anymore. That chapter is done. My friend Emily Shore, another close friend, a therapist actually, who has been gently reflecting back to me what she sees for the past several months, told me something recently that I keep returning to. She said, "Virginia, you didn't leave your family. You left a version of yourself that had decided she had to earn love. That's not abandonment, that's arrival." Arrival. I have been thinking about that word ever since. Arriving at yourself. Finally. After 30 years of departing from yourself in small installments to try to become less threatening to people who were threatened by the simple fact of your existence. I arrived. It happened on a kitchen floor. It happened in the dark, driving home on a highway with the radio low. It happened in a letter I wrote between midnight and 4 in the morning, not from anger but from clarity. It happened on a couch with pastries, and a friend who knew before I did that I needed to be somewhere safe. Arrival is not always beautiful. It does not always look like a triumphant moment. Sometimes it looks like a woman quietly closing a door behind her and walking to her car in the snow and deciding, without fanfare, that she is done with the performance. But it counts. It counts just as much. If you are listening to this and something in it has named something in you, if you have a mother like Paula or a sister like Madsen before the letter, or an aunt like Kimball who has been calling cruelty honesty for so long that the whole family accepted the rebranding, I want to say something to you directly. You are not too sensitive. You are not imagining it. The love that is used as a weapon is not love. It is control wearing love's clothing. And recognizing that, even if it takes you 30 years, even if it takes you a kitchen floor at midnight, even if it takes you 4 hours of dark highway to get there, recognizing that is not a failure. It is the beginning of everything. You do not have to make a dramatic exit. You do not have to write a letter, leave in the night, build walls, or declare a war. You just have to decide, clearly, quietly, with whatever small piece of yourself you have left that hasn't been worn down by trying to be easier to love, that you are worth the full room. That you do not have to shrink to make other people comfortable. That your history and your pain and your progress belong to you, not to someone else's arsenal. You are allowed to leave rooms that hurt you. You are allowed to take yourself with you. You are allowed to send a cashmere scarf and mean it genuinely and still not come back. You are allowed to arrive. There are people in your life, Taylors, Emilys, Bens, who finally call, who are watching and hoping and waiting with pastries. Let them in. And to my mother, I love you. I have always loved you. I will probably always love you in the complicated, bruised, deeply specific way you love someone who shaped the first language you ever learned. But love does not require my silence. Love does not require my presence at tables where I am being planned against. Love, real love, the kind worth having, requires honesty, and I have finally learned to offer it. The door is not locked. But I will not stand on the other side of it waiting to be let in anymore. I have a key now. I made it myself. My name is Virginia. I am 30 years old. I live in Columbus, Ohio, and I am finally, slowly, in the exact right place. Thank you for sitting with this story. Thank you for letting it take as long as it needed to take. If you see yourself in any part of it, in the kitchen floor, in the dark highway drive, in the hope that keeps dragging you back even when you know better, you are not alone in that, not even close. We are all just trying to find our way home to ourselves. Some of us are just taking the long road. If this story reached something real inside of you today, if you felt seen or heard or like someone finally said the thing you've been trying to find words for, please subscribe. Your support means everything, and it reminds me I'm not alone in this. Leave a comment below and tell me, have you ever had to leave a room or a whole Christmas to protect yourself? What did it cost you? What did it give you? I read every single one. And if you know someone who needs this story today, share it with them. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can give another person is proof that someone else survived the thing they're in the middle of. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourself. You deserve a soft place to land.